and welcome to Rising. I'm thrilled to be back at the desk today with a new name. I'm going by Amber Duke, my married name now, and I'm thrilled to be joined as well remotely by Jessica Burbank.
Congratulations to you, Amber. It's good to be with you all. Happy Friday.
Absolutely. Well, Jessica, unfortunately, we start off with some sad news. Hundreds of local and federal police are still on a manhunt for the man accused of shooting and killing 18 people at a Maine bowling alley and bar on Wednesday night. A sister-in-law to the suspect, 40-year-old Robert Card, confirmed to the Wall Street Journal that he received 2 weeks of inpatient psychiatric treatment over this past summer as he was hearing voices. She said he started believing he could hear people say awful things about him. A former neighbor told the New York Post that Card, an Army firearms instructor, is capable of, quote, hiding for a long time. The neighbor added, quote, if you know the area, there's a lot of places you can hide. You could never see something like that from an airplane or helicopter. Other family members of Card's have told media they've texted him begging him to surrender, but for now, the search continues.
Meanwhile, down on Capitol Hill, Maine Representative Jared Golden reversed his long-held commitments to the Second Amendment and called for a national assault weapons ban. Let's watch.
Things happen that bring your worst nightmares to life. Yesterday, this is what happened in Lewiston. At a time like this, a leader is forced to grapple with things that are far greater than his or herself. Humility is called for as accountability is sought by the victims of a tragedy such as this one. Out of fear of this dangerous world that we live in and my determination to protect my own daughter and wife in our home and in our community, because of a false confidence that our community was above this and that we could be in full control, among many other misjudgments, I have opposed efforts to ban deadly weapons of war like the assault rifle used to carry out this crime. The time has now come for me to take responsibility for this failure, which is why I now call on the United States Congress to ban assault rifles like the one used by the sick perpetrator of this mass killing in my hometown of Lewiston, Maine. For the good of my community, I will work with any colleague to get this done in the time that I have left in Congress. To the people of Lewiston, my constituents throughout the 2nd District, to the families who lost loved ones, and to those who have been harmed, I ask for forgiveness and support as I seek to put an end to these terrible shootings.
It's always sad when we have one of these mass shootings. We think about all of the lives lost. I hear him call the perpetrator of this a sick perpetrator. And I think of the use of the word sick. We often say sick and twisted when we think about serial killers and people committing these crimes. But also, when someone calls in sick to work, you don't think of sick in that sense. But when we talk about mental illness, I think it's important that we do, because this was another one of those cases where people close to him were familiar with his mental state over the summer, where while he was at a training facility, a shooting range with other soldiers, he said he heard voices in his head telling him to shoot them. And I think that's a clear sign that this is someone who needed a lot of mental health care, needed help from his community and family, and didn't receive it. And I think so many cases of mass shootings are just examples of failures of communities to address mental health care and people around them who are sick, and systemic failures to provide proper care to veterans once they come home from serving.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. He only spent 2 weeks in this inpatient facility, and if you're at the point where you're hearing voices in your head that are telling you to commit violence, 2 weeks doesn't seem like nearly enough time to have that situation fixed before you go back out into society. Clearly, he was still struggling with some issues prior to committing this heinous act. And you're exactly right. This seems to be a common thread among these mass shootings, where people around the suspect repeatedly say, we either told law enforcement or we sent signals to the FBI that something was wrong and they didn't follow up on it. Perfect example was in the Parkland school shooting down in Florida. That individual had been allegedly reported to the FBI on perhaps as many of a dozen different occasions, and the FBI never followed up. They never coordinated with the local police to make sure that this individual not only didn't have access to firearms, but also was going through treatment. He was completely left out of any type of care. And it seems like whenever these things happen, people don't want to talk about the larger societal trends in a decline in mental well-being, especially of our young people. We are now facing a period of time where our young people are prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication at record levels. They report having mental illness at record levels, and they go on social media websites like TikTok and Instagram where mental illness is even glorified and treated like something that's trendy. And more people, especially young people, report being lonely than ever before. And we don't seem to be doing anything or even discussing that as a real problem and trying to address the root issues of why so many people are lashing out, particularly in terms of these random violent events.
Yeah, and it's often described as the hard policy approach to address those problems. That takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It probably takes reckoning with a lot of bureaucratic agencies like the VA, ensuring that it gets more funding, ensuring that that funding is allocated properly. We have over 30,000 veterans from the post 9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan who have committed suicide, which is 4 times the amount of troops we lost in combat. That number should startle everyone. We need better mental health care for our veterans, especially. And then when we think about things like the FDA, not really regulating our foods very well, where the same foods we eat in the United States are illegal in other countries. These are messing with our internal organs. They're messing with the chemical makeup within our body. I'm sure there are mental health ramifications. So many people who study neuroscience say that there's a gut-mind connection, and that your mental health is determined by the food you eat and the quality of it. There are so many things we could trace to a lot of the mental health issues we experience, the loneliness. I think a lot of children are losing meaning. There's not a lot of places for children to play outside with each other. Our outside that we've created, you'll see the photos on the internet. It's gray strip malls and highways that are overrun by cars. We really need to invest in community, I think, so that kids have meaning, so that they don't have these issues of loneliness. And is this really the hard policy solution? Or is the hard policy response to make this issue about banning weapons, when really what we need to do is the hard policy work of investing in our communities? It's, I think, a lot harder to make this issue about guns and try and do the politically impossible and ban weapons in the United States of America and allow mass shootings to continue to happen. I think it's much harder to continue to lose Americans in mass shootings than to do something meaningful legislatively.
Yeah, it's really a shame, because this is something that affects people, of course, beyond the mass shootings, because when you have people who are suffering from a mental illness epidemic, you have people who are dropping dead daily from overdoses. You have people who are dying by suicide. You have cases like this where people lash out and try to get attention by committing mass shootings. All of these situations are rooted from the same problem of people feeling disconnected from one another and lashing out for help in the most horrible of ways as sort of a last resort. And your point about community is so important. I always think about at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when we talked about lockdowns and 15 days to slow the spread. The first things that were shut down in society were the places that people typically go in order to find community with other people and the ability to find support, whether that was churches, small businesses, community centers, parks. I mean, there were cases where moms were threatened with arrest because they took their kid to a public park so they could go outside and play. People were discouraged from being outside exercising, told that if they went for a run, they had to wear a mask. And I think it's indicative of a deeper sickness in society when the things that our public health officials or the things that our politicians target first, more than anything, are the places and things and activities that people use in order to help their mental health.
It's important you brought up earlier, I want to go back to it, the FBI not investigating when they are flagged about folks with mental health issues. We think about the FBI in a really pejorative sense on the right and the left in the United States today because of how they have used their personnel and resources to investigate citizens that we don't deem particularly threatening to the population of us in the United States. The mistrust we have in government because of how our institutions have been used against our own citizens is precisely why so many working class people across the United States do not want weapons to be banned in the United States. When I think about why I have a firearm, it's because I don't really trust the police to come and protect me if someone comes onto the property that I live on. A lot of people don't even think the police could get there in time if they do feel that they can call the police and the police will help this situation. Also, when we think about the larger weapons like assault rifles, we go back to oftentimes why the Second Amendment was written in the first place, and it's to form a militia and also to protect against a tyrannical government. A lot of people have mistrust in the United States government, and that is why they want to have weapons. We should be dealing with that mistrust and repairing our democracy and institutions before we fault everyday working class people for having that mistrust that was created by the precise government officials that talk about these weapons bans. I really don't think anyone wants a full weapons ban who is serving in Congress today. But that is what everyday working class Americans have been made to believe by how this issue has been treated by their leaders. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed as well. And so if we don't address all of this mistrust, I think this problem is going to continue to get worse. I think another reason for this mistrust is precisely because they treat veterans so badly and we don't have good health care and mental health care in the United States. And I think this issue is a lot more complex than just talking about banning weapons. I just really think the conversation needs to be centered around systemic issues and policies that address those issues at their very root.
Yeah, there's no question that when the FBI spends all of its time trying to wrap people up in this fake kidnapping case of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, instead of investigating people who could be radicalized or investigating Larry Nassar, the child predator who was with the U.S. gymnastics team, dropping the ball in the Jeffrey Epstein case, it's no wonder that people don't trust the government and want to arm themselves just in case the government decides that it's going to use its justice arm to come after them. So there's a very good reason why people in this country decide to own firearms. There's, of course, recreational reasons as well. I come from a family that grew up hunting and still does to this day. So I agree. Banning weapons is not the answer, especially when they're talking about so-called assault weapons, which are usually just semi-automatic firearms, which are, of course, the most popular kind of gun for Americans to own. We're going to have to leave it there. More rising after this.